Today my guest is Dr. William Bill Danko. He is the co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The Millionaire Next Door, and also his newest book, Richer Than a Millionaire. And in just a minute, we're going to talk with Bill about happiness and money. But first, a quick reminder, if you like the show CREPN Radio, there are a couple things you can do. You can like, share, and subscribe. And as always, you can leave a comment. We love to hear from our listeners. And if you'd like to see how handsome our guests are, be sure to check out our YouTube channel, and that's Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. And also, please consider subscribing. It helps all the algorithms and lets other people know about us. With that, I want to welcome my guest. Bill, welcome to CREPN Radio.
Thank you, Darren. Glad to be here.
And this is truly the Frankenstein edition here. Bill has been very, very generous with his time already. We've been trying to string this one together. But I'm so delighted to have you on today, and did not want to waste the opportunity. Before we get started, though, if you could take just a minute and share with the listeners a little bit about your background.
Sure. I was a professor of marketing for 31 years at the State University of New York at Albany. And I was also a consultant during that time and a public speaker, and just having my career path as a marketing person has been very rewarding. But at the same time, I'm also a family man. Been married for 45 years, have 3 adult children, 5 grandchildren, and life is grand.
Great. Well, I got to tell you, there are a few books in the 90s or before the 90s that I ever read cover to cover and made notes on and highlighted and kind of set a real frame of mind for me. And one is my copy of the Millionaire Next Door. And I'm just so delighted to have the opportunity to speak with you today. As we kind of jump into the topic here, I'd love to get a little bit of sense of, you mentioned you were a marketing instructor or professor. How much of what were the courses you were teaching? I mean, in marketing, that's kind of a broad spectrum of study. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to one course in particular I took with Professor Tom Stanley in 1973. And in that course, a consumer behavior course, which I did very well in, I got an A, he asked me to assist him with his very first study of the affluent market. And that's when the ball really got rolling. I mean, so you're right, marketing has so many aspects. I mean, I like to think of there's marketing and then there's everything else, right? Well, in this particular vein of research, we concentrated on survey research and statistical analysis of who really has wealth in America. And so Tom encouraged me to get an MBA and continue studying with him, and I did. And he also then encouraged me to go get my PhD, which I did at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And the point is, during this period from 1973 to 1993, Tom and I had done a series of academic studies together, as well as a number of consulting studies. But in 1993, kind of a pivotal year, he called me up. He was then working in Georgia, and I was still in New York. He called me up and described a new project called Big Hat, No Cattle. And it was about the illusion of wealth in America. So using our survey research skills, and in fact, while I was at the university, one of the favorite courses that I would teach would be marketing research, statistical analysis, and computer analysis of data sets to infer something about market segment. So using those skills, we did another nationwide survey for the Big Hat No Cattle project. And by 1996, the book was published, and the rest is history. It was a New York Times bestseller for 3 consecutive years, and it changed a lot of lives. It changed my life in many ways, in a very positive way. Paid a lot of bills, that's for sure, and it keeps on giving. It's wonderful. So that's how we got there with the plan for uh, Millionaire Next Door. Then in 1996, though, when the book was launched, that was also a pivotal year in my life, which was, well, really life changing in so many ways. I was still teaching, still doing the research, but at the same time, it was when my mother had a stroke. Now, that's unfortunate, but she happened to be the primary caregiver to my quadriplegic brother. So guess what? I became more involved on a daily basis, um, dealing with my brother and his care. And my wife and I vowed to keep him out of a nursing home, which we did. We bought him a house. It was great. And all the problems that go with maintaining somebody outside of a nursing home. But we helped him age with dignity. And he really, during the visits, in fact, I was the weekend aide most of the time because it's so hard to hire an aide for a weekend. We would have these discussions about life. And, here's a guy who couldn't even scratch his nose. And he really had to have everything done for him. And it was really an act of love. But here I am, a New York Times bestseller, being a home health care aide. Now, I would do it again in a heartbeat, that's for sure. But my point is, it's a humbling experience. And when you realize we're all on this same path together, we get born, we live, and we die. It's what we do in between that really motivated the research for the Richer Than a Millionaire, which I did with my colleague, Rich Van Ness, who lives in New York State. He's another professor. And we looked at it in the sense of what lessons do we want to give our children and our grandchildren, and in fact, our students, who we look at as children in a figurative sense. What life lessons do we want to extend? And the idea is money is good, but money and happiness are better. And that is how the two books diverge from each other. Millionaire Next Door shows you how to make the money. Richer Than a Millionaire reiterates many of the lessons in Millionaire Next Door, but it takes it to another dimension. It looks at your psychological health. Are you well adjusted or are you maladjusted? And what are the correlates of those who are happy and wealthy? That's the path we took.
Now,
we can talk about both of those in more detail, of course.
Yeah, no, I would love to. I mean, what a crazy kind of a, combination of paths. I mean, on one end, you're studying the millionaires and you're having great success and the way I think most Americans would look. And, if you were to describe wealth or success, being a bestseller on the New York Times and all that, and then the human factor strikes, and the opportunity to have such a human experience with your immediate family like that, or I mean your extended family with your brother and that, and wow, what a fascinating ride you had there.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because in the Millionaire Next Door, there were a couple of things that I remember. Specifically, it was basically looks are deceiving, I guess would be kind of the way I would summarize it. And that if somebody looks like a millionaire, it's kind of like you say, the no hat or the big hat, no cattle kind of thing. They may have all the newest, nicest cars and all the vacations and all that stuff, but chances are, if they're spending all their money, they're probably not keeping any of it.
This is true. Yeah, this is looks are deceiving. That's probably the number one lesson to be learned here. If you look at the appendix in The Millionaire Next Door, we have a litany of about 150 job titles of millionaires we've interviewed over the years. And it's really quite an eclectic group. Yeah, there are physicians, and there are attorneys, and there are executives, and there are architects. But also on that list are things like trailer park owners, car wash franchise owners, um, bovine semen distributors,
Yeah, that's a
auctioneers. I
right.
mean, if you do a content analysis on that list, you find that about 80% of the people on the list would be considered blue collar millionaires, and the other 20%, the professions, which are, wonderful people. But here's the problem. We have found, and this has been repeatedly, study after study, that for every person who can actually afford one of the high-end items like a fabulous house or a brand new car on a regular basis, there are 4 to 5 others who buy the same item because they want to look like a millionaire. And so we have these people who, again, it's the big hat and no cattle. They have all the looks, but they also have the mortgage and the expenses that go along with it. But this dovetails into the happiness issue. In the book of Proverbs in the Bible, chapter 22, verse 7, there's the line, "The borrower is a slave to the lender." Well, when you have a wall-to-wall mortgage and you have onerous car payments, you can't get off your economic treadmill. You have to keep working to keep that lifestyle going. On the other hand, when you have these satisfied, in many cases, blue-collar millionaires who live in ordinary neighborhoods, drive pickup trucks or older cars, they're not worried about car payments. They're not worried about a burdensome mortgage, but they have a lot of financial independence. And that makes all the difference in the world in terms of your outlook on life. Having money that's free and clear and a positive cash flow is a lot better than saying, I have to get up to work because I am a slave to the lender who lent me this money. And look at the problems we had in 2008 and 2009. I mean, didn't we get to the point of like zero down payments on houses?
Oh
You know,
yeah, they were paying you for a while to take out a loan. I
yeah,
mean, there was
and
100.
100% mortgages. I mean,
Yeah,
it was just folly, folly.
right, right.
So in many ways, we bring these problems on ourselves when we don't understand what we're really getting into.
Yeah. No, the whole book. I mean, it really kind of gave me an appreciation for the way my dad uh, lived. Not that he was any kind of uber wealthy guy, but there was a contentment in his life that,
Hmm.
as a child growing up, I couldn't understand. I wanted the new flashy whatever it was, and then as as I got a job and started a career and was trying to make my way, there's a certain sense of like, my dad did know what he was doing, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. In fact, on one of our surveys, and the results are included in Richer Than a Millionaire, we have a graph that answers the question, how much is enough? Now, listen to this perspective. When we ask people, what is their net worth? And we've asked hundreds of them about this very issue. What is your net worth? And the follow-up question is, how much do you think you would need to feel rich? And basically it goes like this. It's a curve that says if you have $500,000 at net worth in actuality, to feel rich, you say you need 5 times as much, or 2.5 million. And then we ask the people who have 2.5 million, how much do you need? Unfortunately, they don't need 5 times. They only need twice as much on average to feel wealthy, or 5 million. It's ridiculous. right now in America, and it's hard to say with the adjustment in the stock market this past couple of weeks. One report says we've lost 500,000 millionaires in this meltdown. But irrespective of that, basically, of all the households in the U.S., the median net worth is about $100,000. And from 100,000 up to the $1 million mark, that puts you in the top 12% of all households. To be a one percenter, basically $11 million will do it. And so when people say they need these lofty amounts, like I have 2.5 million, now I need 5 million, you know, you're in the stratosphere in terms of where most people are not even close to having that wealth accumulation. And so people have this distorted perception as to how much is enough. And so when you talk about your dad, he was well adjusted, I hope, I suspect, from what I glean from what you've said.
Oh
But
yeah, no, he
he
was
didn't
not.
get it.
Yeah, he was not. Chasing some crazy thing. He was, a certain. He had leisure, but he wasn't. He was not a spend. Didn't spend every dime he had. He was kind of tight with the purse and
And
would.
he was probably brought up during the Depression era.
Yep. Now he'd drive the wheels off a car. It was. Which I fully respect now. uh, as opposed to constantly being in the newest, latest, greatest model, and like you said, just being a slave to the lender kind of thing. And the fact he was a banker too, I think, also kind of shaped a lot of that too. He recognized the weight of debt, kind of thing, and how it affects you. Um, there was a blurb in the book. I remember, and it was talking about. I mean, here you were asking kind of the question is how much is enough, kind of thing. There was an equation kind of thing that I remember, and just refresh my memory here just a bit
Yeah.
ago about how to determine if you're wealthy. And
Yeah.
essentially there was a calculation of if you take your age times your annual income, divide by 10. Uh,
Right.
and I was kind of curious because it was funny in my book there was a weathered page, and I can't tell you because I think I've read this thing a couple of times, how recent it was that I was doing the calculations. But I'd ask you, given the recent times and just all the economic differences we've been through, if do you think that measurement still holds? Uh,
Well, yeah, I do. Look, when you're on the tails of the age distribution, it kind of falls apart. But if you're between 30 and 60, basically prime working years, that's tended to be a pretty good predictor. In fact, the way it's used is, your age times income times 10% or divide by 10. That gives you the number of expected net worth. And if you're four times that amount, you're designated a prodigious accumulator of wealth. And if you're one quarter that amount, you're considered to be an underaccumulator of wealth. So it's pretty robust, but it certainly was a very useful device in the book to contrast and compare the pause and the ahs. And there's some good illustrations. For example, Dr. North and Dr. South in the book. For example, Dr. North, and these were actual surveys, but Dr. North meaning, well, you're going in the above and beyond direction. He would buy used cars, whereas Dr. South, on the other hand, had the equivalent income, but every year or every other year, he would take time out and do a lot of shopping for a luxury car. So you look at how you allocate your time. And Dr. North says, look, I just need transportation. In fact, having a good luxury car that I bought used, having somebody else give me the gift of early depreciation is probably one of the best gifts I could ask for. Whereas Dr. South, when he has his new baby, goes into a parking lot of a shopping center and gets his first ding, kind of takes it personally.
right.
So it just changes your mindset altogether in terms of, what you expect your money to do for you. And Dr. North says, look, I have good cars, but they're good used cars, and I'm not a slave to that car. It's already paid for, and I don't want to abuse it. But at the same time, if it does get damaged, I'm not bent out of shape. Okay, that's just one illustration that to take to heart.
Yeah, no pain and agony for the door ding. If it's, if it's already got a scratch on it, you're not worried about it like you would be if it's got no scratches and you get the first scratch. So,
But it really comes down to also the time value of money, doesn't it?
right,
It's look, I used to drive a Mercedes, and it was great, but then I was a sinner. What can I say? But the Mercedes was a wonderful car, but now I drive a Subaru, and it's great in the snow in upstate New York. I can tell you that. And the point is, I look at the car as just a mode of transportation, and the Subaru is a very reliable mode of transportation, quite frankly. And my wife drives an 11-year-old Volvo. It's wonderful. But what do we do then? We have these older cars, so we're not paying for car payments, and so you can take that extra money and start accumulating and investing in a diverse set of assets. And that's
right,
another key here.
right. Now, speaking of the assets, I did want to ask you a little bit about some of the diversification that some of the people you interviewed in the first or the first edition there. Um, can you describe the percentage of people you interviewed that were invested in real estate?
Well, can't give you exact percentages, but I remember a graph that I had created for one of my talks that looked at the greater your net worth, the greater the probability that you had investment real estate. Right now, those folks who are below the median net worth in America, the vast majority of their net worth is their home value. Those who are the millionaires and living in these, $300,000 houses, which is relatively modest in many respects, um, are also invested in office buildings. In my own example, if I could share this with you,
Sure.
I own some standing timber in the Adirondack Mountains. And, you have to wait every 20 years to do a harvest. But the point is, there are cherry trees. There's some good lumber there, as well as some pulp lumber. I understand that. And interestingly, once you own a property like that, acreage, I got a letter the other day from a solar panel company saying, we would like to lease about 40 acres of your property to put up solar panels. Well, I don't even know if that's legal in the Adirondack Park, whether you can do that. But the point is, I'm not inclined to let somebody clear cut 40 acres to put up solar panels. It's just not a good stewardship. I mean, I love the mountains, and I think I have an obligation to help preserve the mountains. And doing selective timbering is one thing. Clear cutting 40 acres is quite another. So, but it's an investment piece of real estate that I own, as well as a rental property and as well as some other things besides my primary house. But the point is, you know, more things to keep track of, right? The
Right.
more things you own, that's for sure. But it's good. They have each one of these elements has a purpose in my portfolio. Some is enjoyment, some is timbering, and the others are rental property. So,
Right. Well, in kind of diversification there too, it sounds
mhm.
like, in just I think the chart that you described there about, the percentage of people that had some wealth attached to real estate, I think is one of the things that I've come to recognize, and it's not exactly a buy low, hit the .com stock or whatever the newest, latest, greatest stock is, but it's a slow path to a pretty sure thing. I mean, depending on how you do it. I mean, it's obviously if you buy in a super depressed market at a low price, your chances of having a significant win are greater. But just across the all of time, um, there is some kind of the boring. I think that's the other thing I took away from your book was just how many of the occupations were boring. They
Yeah,
weren't.
dull, yeah, dull, normal, boring. Things
Yeah,
like, okay, like owning standing timber every 20 years, do a harvest.
yeah,
You know, there's a long lead time, but you can keep it in the family and it's protecting nature as well. So,
right.
yeah,
And but just that whole thing that it's not flash in the pan kind of thing. It's uh, you know basically you put your nose down, you do your work, and you kind of be smart about it,
yeah.
disciplined.
I
Um,
mean, there's so much talk about, of course, the stock market, especially this past month. But the stock market portfolio is less and less important the richer you are, because you have these other diverse assets, whether it be artwork, whether it be timber, whether it be rental properties and office buildings. Like, I'm not minimizing the stress our economy's under right now. I mean, everybody is feeling the pinch, that's for sure. It's these are unprecedented times. But at the same time, if most of your wealth is not in the stock market, but you have other assets like physical properties, um, you can tend to weather the storm somewhat easier.
right, and if you've been able to achieve some sort of equilibrium where you're not totally beholden to debt, um, if there are some rough times, you've got a much better chance to withstand, um, you know, whatever the
Not only
storm.
that, but I can go hunting on my property if it comes down to that, and I
Sure.
have a lifetime supply of firewood. I mean, it's
Right, right.
I hope it doesn't come to that, but you can go into survival mode if you have the resources. That's for sure.
No, I certainly hope we don't get to that point, but it is certainly comforting to know that you've got that option
Yeah.
available to you. So let me
Hmm.
ask you the newer book, Richer Than a Millionaire.
Hmm.
Um, I kind of described to you what I consider the summary, and I don't want to give away the book. I want to encourage everybody to go out and get your book, but this balance. Um, can you describe what how would you summarize it, and
No.
specifically that because I think I read a little bit in the some of the stuff I was reading about it. It's kind of like this recognition of the younger people that basically rudderless, not really having they want to be rich, but they don't have
Really, yeah. I don't know what it means. That's
right.
right. Well, first of all, the Richer Than a Millionaire came out in 2017, and it's readily available on Amazon.com. So I encourage your folks to look into that. Um, the Again, being a marketing researcher, there's a psychology professor, Ed Diener, who made a life work out of looking at subjective well-being or happiness, and he put his reliable and valid scale on measuring your subjective well-being or happiness. He put it into the public domain, and he has 5 statements that you respond to on a 7-point scale. And the details, of course, are in the book. But if you score low, like a 5 out of a possible 35 points, you are very unhappy with your lot in life. And if you score high, close to 35, you are very satisfied. You have achieved your goals. Well, what we have found when we send out thousands of questionnaires and we look at net worth, whether you're between 100,000 and a million or a million and above, we purposely left off the less than 100,000 because it would confound. I mean, it's kind of hard Scrabble when you're don't have any money. I mean, you have to have something going on. So 100,000 to a million is one group called the near millionaires, and then the millionaires and above. And what we found using Diener's scale, that 73% of the near millionaires are pretty satisfied with their lot in life, and 88% of the millionaires are pretty satisfied. Well, the point is, we have a minority in each group, but what makes the happy different from the unhappy? And what we found is a number of correlates. We go back to the writings of Benjamin Franklin. He wrote an essay in 1758 titled The Way to Wealth. It's about a 3,500 word essay that could be found on the internet. He wrote it under the pseudonym Richard Saunders, as in Poor Richard's Almanac. And in his lessons, he talks about the need to be industrious and frugal and prudent, and all the things we talk about in the Millionaire Next Door. But he also says being prudent and frugal and industrious is all wonderful, but it's all blasted unless we're also charitable. And so we looked at this notion of, well, what does charity have to do with it? Well, you look at the great religions in the world, and Judaism, in Isaiah specifically, it talks about giving your coat to those who have no coats, feeding the hungry. In Christianity, in Matthew 25, that which you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me. You know, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or naked? That which you've done to the poor, you've done unto me. In Islam, one of the 5 pillars of Islam is almsgiving, being charitable. In the Hindu tradition, being charitable is part of the mindset. So we have the religions indicating that being charitable is important. We have Benjamin Franklin saying, you must be charitable to your fellow man. Let's measure it. Let's measure, how much do you give to charity in dollars? How much time do you volunteer to charity? So we have a couple of metrics now, as well as our satisfaction scale. And so we're then able to look at these as correlates, and then with pre-testing and various psychologists and clergy looking at the questionnaire, you know, they come up with good suggestions of, you got to ask questions like, well, is God really important in your life? Are you at peace with your soul? Are you anxious about the future? What we find is the millionaires and near millionaires who are satisfied with life are not anxious about the future. They are God-centered. They are at peace with their soul. And in contrast, we have those who are dissatisfied with life are just the opposite of all these. There's something wrong, you know, and these are very anxious times, especially with this COVID virus thing. You know, I don't know what the implications are on the long term, but at the same time, you have to look at, well, what's really important in your life? Is it your love of family, caring for your brother, for example? You know, realizing that the stock market tends to fluctuate anyway, and we do have things like the plague and polio and things like that have come around, and somehow civilization has survived. What kind of lessons do we want to impart to the next generation? And that's really the motivation for the book. What do we tell our students? What do we tell our children? What do we tell our grandchildren about how to live? Sure, save 20% of whatever you make. Don't live beyond your means. Buy a good depreciated car. Yeah, I get all that. But at the same time, be charitable. Don't be anxious about the future. Try to develop a peace with your soul. So it really, I think, is an important life lesson that we're trying to impart with this new research on Richer Than a Millionaire.
No, that's a definitely some time-tested, you know, mottos or ways of living. You referenced all the different religious teachings that have certainly made that a kind of a cornerstone of their belief and just the recognition of kind of the golden rule.
It is,
You
yeah,
know,
exactly. It is the golden rule, doing unto others
right,
as you
right,
would have them do unto you.
yeah,
Some cynical people say, well, the golden rule is he who has the gold rules.
yeah,
That is so cynical. But this is the kind of stuff that goes on in our culture, our so-called culture. We've gotten
yeah,
away from some basic values that made this country wonderful, and we've been slipping away. We're going to
yeah.
try to reverse that.
You know, it's troubling when you look around and you see, and I think part of it is just that level of satisfaction, and I think that maybe if you go back and you look at how many people don't have enough, or have that ability to feel like you've mentioned, if you have under 100,000, you're not, we didn't consider you in the
Yeah.
to skew, so you wouldn't skew the results. But I think really, if you look at it even in that broader term, how the percentage of people that don't have that, which creates kind of that anxiety, and then there's I think there's all sorts of interesting things playing out right now. I mean, if you've been to the grocery store lately on your you know provisional run to try and stay out of the public way and not get sick, you've been down the toilet paper aisle and noticed that there's if there is something there, it's very very little. And
Yeah.
just you see these people that are taking all the toilet paper, and kind of that fear thing, as opposed to I've got enough and I'll be okay. Everybody needs some kind of thing, and
It is fear, and it
yeah,
is an anxiety, and I know it's real.
right,
I'm saying it doesn't have to be that way if you just get down to some basic values. I mean, look, one of the problems I think we've developed in America is the way our higher education system works. I mean, somehow we've convinced everybody that you must go to college. Well, I just think that's a mistaken idea. Having been a professor for 31 years, um, some of my students shouldn't have been there, that's for sure. And the point is, they're accumulating debt with their tuition and all that, and didn't belong there in the first place, but they still have this obligation. And what's wrong with getting a trade? What's wrong with being a skilled plumber? What's wrong with being a skilled carpenter? All of these things are, I think, better paths for so many of our young people where they can build a career without incurring this huge expense that we have in the university and college system.
yeah. No, I think there is a little bit of momentum behind that. Kind of rethink that. I see people asking that very question. I mean, if you're looking at coming out of a 4 year, and that's a hope that you can get it done in 4 years based on just all the people that are in
Yeah.
line ahead of you. And I know my son, he's a junior in high school, and we're in the line and kind of looking at our options and stuff, and just coming to the realization of how many people there are in the education system, how available the money is, and how willing they are to sign you up for the debt, that it can really prohibit you from accomplishing your education in 4 years, which then adds to your time and cost, and then to come out of college with such an enormous load of debt before you've even gotten started, it really does make you question, um, the value of that, or the cost benefit. I mean, I know when I was going, I could basically work a summer job and pay for my way through the year. Fortunately, my parents were able to help and pay for
Mhm.
my education. But still, if it had come to that, it was not out of reach. Uh,
Yeah. And Warren Buffett gave some pretty good advice about how much help should you give your children. He says, give them enough so that they can do anything, but not so much they can do nothing. And so, get them on the right path of economic self-sufficiency. One of the problems, and it's highlighted more in the Millionaire Next Door, one of the chapters highlights the issue of economic outpatient care. What does it mean to subsidize an adult child? And paying for tuition or extraordinary medical bills might be very good use of a parent's money. However, when you start buying cars and down payments on houses and subsidizing a lifestyle, you're creating something that can't be sustained without the input of the parents. And that can be really dangerous, really dangerous. So I think every responsible parent wants to see their child become economically self-sufficient. I can't imagine any responsible, but it's also a matter of, I'm just trying to help. I'm just
Right.
trying to enhance. What you're doing is creating an economic cripple.
Yep. You're making them dependent on it. And
Mhm.
no, it is. As a parent, I look at that and I hope that I'm never faced with that. But I do recognize that we go to great lengths to try and minimize the potential for pain. But
Yeah,
hopefully, we can
right.
teach a lesson without
Mhm.
burying them in some sort of a painful situation. But no, it's a challenge, and I think that everybody has to navigate that as best they can. And who am I to say you're doing it wrong or I'm doing it right? But I do recognize that there's value in pain. There's a lesson to be learned in pain, and
You know what? And in fact, Ben Franklin, in that essay, That Way to Wealth, he says, and this is not from Nike, he says the actual line in there is no gain without pain. It's He wrote that 250 years ago, and I think he's right.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Hey, Bill, if we could, I'd like to shift gears here for a second. Mention you before we had to try and rig this thing up that by day I'm an insurance broker. And one of the things we do is risk management. And we try and assess the risk and try and determine uh, what to do with the risk. There's a couple
Hmm.
of strategies we look at. The first is, can we avoid the risk? If we can't avoid it, then we look to see is there a way we can minimize the risk. And if we can't avoid or minimize, then we look to transfer the risk. And that's where an insurance policy comes in, which is basically a risk transfer vehicle. And I'd like to ask my guest if they can take a look at their view of the world. And specifically, I'm not looking for an insurance-related answer. Uh, Anything you can see, think, and
Yeah,
frame this, it would be welcome. But if you're willing, I'd like to ask you, Bill Danko, what is the biggest risk?
yeah. I think when people are just so blind to, well, for example, in Miami Beach right now, there are a lot of people with very beautiful houses on a floodplain or a rising ocean. And one of the things that they're doing in Miami is raising the roadways and creating culverts to drain off the water. What seemed like a good idea at the time to build a house next to the ocean is, in retrospect, not a very good idea. So sometimes we bring this on ourselves. And, you know, I remember reading a book from the 1950s, How to Build Your Dream House for $3,500. And it was kind of a classic. And chapter one talks about first select a building site on a hill as opposed to on a floodplain. Okay, people walk into these problems, I think, in a naive way, saying, "Oh, there's land available. Let me build." Okay, so that's one thing. Being just not being prudent. Okay, but also in minimizing risk. If you do have some pretty good assets, one thing that I have seen with some high net worth individuals, and one thing that I use myself, is that, for example, my timber, my rental property, and a lakeside property I have, not my primary house, they're all individual limited liability companies, freestanding. And then all three of them are held in a limited partnership. So my physical assets are divorced from my uh, my liquid assets, and so having some good legal structure is certainly very good in terms of minimizing the risk, as well as having your umbrella policy from your insurance company, but having the ability to separate your assets through like the LLCs and then the limited partnership, that is something that is, well, one thing I use and I endorse, and it works for me. My accountant likes it because he gets to do all these extra tax forms every year.
Right.
but, uh, but it's okay. It gives me peace of mind. And then in terms of there's a societal risk. We talked about a lot of lessons here, about frugality and the 20% and living below your means and all that stuff. And that's all important. Those are good, solid lessons. But at the end of Franklin's essay on the way to wealth, he really summarizes it so well. The people heard the message, agreed with it, and then practiced the contrary. The problem is change is hard. People are going to walk into traps. They don't understand the risk they're getting into. What we have to do is be better students, and let's take on some personal responsibility and don't expect the government to bail us out. But don't build in a floodplain. Don't drive recklessly. A lot of things depend on how our society behaves, and that's going to be the thing that minimizes risk. So I think risk is all the stuff that we take on ourselves because we just don't do the homework.
No, it's hard to argue with any of that. Definitely, do what you can to prevent yourself from, or prevent putting yourself in harm's way. I think is definitely
Yeah,
well
and
well
and,
well
and,
said.
and also from a personal risk, you know, um, one of the references in Richer Than a Millionaire, we allude to a study from the Centers for Disease Control. They did a study of death certificates and marital status of people who died after the age of 50. And they found that those who were married at the time of death lived the longest. Those who never married were in between, and those who were divorced lived the least long. And so when we look at our behavior, and we outline this more in the book, the benefits of a positive social relationship, a positive household, a harmonious household really adds to your longevity. That's for sure. We have a local attorney. The TV commercial is marriage is grand and divorce is 20 grand. You get the proportions there.
Right.
But in terms of the emotional and financial problems you bring on when you have a dissolved marriage. So, go into marriage for the right reasons, build a nuclear family that is stable and loving. And what have we have done so many, uh, one of our senators from New York, the late, great Daniel Patrick Moynihan, he was a very good scholar. He wrote a white paper called Defining Deviancy Down. And he was complaining about all the out of wedlock births that we tolerate in society and all of the burdens that the government then has to take on to solve these problems of, welfare and homelessness and things of that nature. He says, if we just got back to some basic values and built a society that says, okay, this is how we build the nuclear family. This is how, we get a proper education that can build a career. And this is how we do things like save 20% of whatever you make and then invest in a diversified portfolio. Boy, we would all be better off. That's for sure.
Um,
Is that enough sermonizing there?
well, it's
Boy,
just yeah. I welcome the sentiments there, and I think that they certainly have proven their worth over time.
yeah,
It's it's
you know,
just it is sad when you look and you see the um, you know how
well,
people are trying and just not understanding that there's a lot of work that goes into it. Um,
yeah. I mean, the metaphor that I think draws this all together when you ask, how does a train run best when it's on its tracks?
right.
We have a lot of train wrecks. We have a lot of train wrecks out there
Right.
saying, "Gee, had I known all these tuition dollars were going to go for naught, and now I have this debt. But I like the lure of a fancy new car. I
Yeah.
wanted to have lakeside or oceanside property
Right.
because it's so nice to be there. Oh my
Right.
goodness.
Want to be on
Let's
vacation
just
all the time, right?
that's right. Let's
Yeah.
just be a little more prudent in our life and and what we expect of the next generation. And and again, these are the kind of lessons that we try to drive home in Richer Than a Millionaire. Rich Van Ness, he has three grandkids. I have five grandkids. And, we would have these discussions as to what kind of lessons do we want to impart before we depart? What lessons do we want to impart before we depart? And so we put it in writing, and hopefully it'll resonate not only with our grandchildren, but also, well, millions of others who are struggling on the high seas of life, like ships without rudders.
Well,
Just trying to give them some direction. That's all we're trying to do.
well, I am on my way to get my own copy of your latest book and look forward to reading it and recommend that others consider the same. And also, again, your first one, the Millionaire Next Door, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, just so
Um,
that they know what they're looking for there. How's that? Can they
yeah,
see that?
yeah, yeah.
You've been a millionaire.
No,
Yeah, I gotta plug it. You gotta.
yeah, absolutely. You got to toot your own horn now every now. I mean,
I'm
it's
a I'm a I'm a book salesman. What can I say? That's
yep,
what I do.
yep,
But
yep.
you know what? It's been a very good life. I'm glad I'm able to help those who can't help themselves. Being look, no matter what your net worth, for all your listeners out there, no matter what your net worth, never forget to be charitable, because there's always somebody worse off than you who could benefit from your time, treasure, and talent. I am absolutely convinced of that. And not only being charitable, is the right thing to do, it'll also truly make you happier. It's one of the key correlates here of being a giver instead of a taker. So my question is, why not be richer than a millionaire
No,
by having these things internalized in your life?
nope. That's a great way to wrap this up. Hey, Bill, where can the listeners go if they'd like to learn more or connect with you?
Yeah, they can go to our website, richer than a millionaire, all as one word, richerthanamillionaire.com. And, you know, we maintain our own website, and we used to just have the word welcome when you signed on to the website. And Rich Van Ness and I and our spouses were down in Marco Island this past winter. And so there's a shot of these two guys, namely yours truly and Rich Van Ness, with a couple of palm trees in the back and a bottle of wine. That's the opening picture about richer than a millionaire.
That's great.
So we enjoy it. It's boy, Marco Island is a wonderful place to be. If you haven't been there, I encourage people to think about it. It's a wonderful vacation spot.
That's great.
And but it snowed yesterday in New York, and so that was a nice springtime surprise.
Well, that's the spring, I suppose. You get a little bit of those spring storms. That'd be a big news story if it snowed on Marco Island, though. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
but
So
it,
yeah, so our bios are there, and plus various articles that we have written that are in the press, and it's all good. It's you know what, we have really been blessed to be able to, bring our message out to the public, and we're in a good place in our lives.
uh,
We enjoy we enjoy good health, both of us, all our spouses too. So far, we're enjoying good health despite this virus thing in New York State, especially. So, oh
well,
boy,
I hope that you can continue to enjoy good health, especially in these times.
yes, and
And
I wish the very same for you, Darren. Really, you and your family. It's absolutely critical to to really assess what is important in life, and that's what's important in life. Being this family unit that can continue to serve others in a very positive way.
uh,
Okay.
you got it. Hey, Bill, I cannot say thanks enough. This has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time and your patience in trying to do this kind of the Frankenstein way we've been doing it. But I have
Yeah.
truly enjoyed it, learned a lot, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. We can have a follow up, and let me show you a big fish that I caught here. Can you see that big fish?
Oh wow, what is that? A brown?
No, it's a rainbow trout.
Oh wow, where is
But
that? Is that up there in
that,
New York, or where'd you?
yeah, right. That was up. In fact, there's a picture of me and Tom Stanley. We were fishing up in Ampersand Bay in the Adirondacks, and I
Oh
was able
wow,
to catch that big one.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's everything is wonderful. It really is. I wish good health continues for you, and let's continue to do the right thing. All right.
All right.
All
For,
right, Darren.
all right. Thanks, Bill.
All right, my brother. Take care of yourself. Bye bye.
All right. For our listeners, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.